All right, it's that time to take a look at the stories making the headlines in the papers. This is Freshly Pressed on a Thursday morning, right here on the Smooth Breakfast on Smooth 98.1. Your love music, love alive station. My name is Ayokunmi. It's great to have you join us on a Thursday, as you always do. So it's an interactive session, as always. So that means you get to share your thoughts with us on the stories, get your opinions in, your points of view, your perspectives. They mean the world to us, and we look forward to hearing them always. So all you need to do is to send a message into us on WhatsApp on 0809 444 0981. 0809 444 0981. That is the WhatsApp number. You can send your messages right there. You can also join us on YouTube where we're streaming live at Smooth 981 FM Lagos. Smooth 981 FM Lagos. Leave your comments in the chat box as well. We're also streaming live on your favorite streaming audio streaming apps. You can listen to us anywhere and anytime. Yes, indeed. All right, joining me this morning too. Take a look at the stories, give his analysis, and of course, break it all down, make sense of everything we're about to jump into. Gbubemi is in the studio with me. Very good morning to you. Great to have you join me on a Thursday.
Good morning, Ayo. Good morning, Lagos, and thanks for having me.
Absolute pleasure having you to take a look at what's been going on. A couple of things that we need to get through this morning. And we're going to begin. Where do we begin? So many things to talk about. Let's begin talking about oil. Let's talk about that particular sector where the federal government on Wednesday, that's yesterday, they directed the management of the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited, that's NNPCL, to increase oil production beyond current levels by the end of the year. And the Minister of State for Petroleum Resources, Mr. Heineken Lokobiri, said this in an interview with the news agency of Nigeria at the Africa Energy Forum in Houston, Texas, in the U.S. Now, Lokobiri emphasized the need for accelerated growth in the nation's oil output. He revealed this. He revealed that although President Tinubu had initially tasked the NNPCL with ramping up production to 2 million barrels per day, but later increased the targets to 2.5 million barrels per day. These we all know the issues concerning oil production, crude oil production right here in Nigeria, and the myriad of issues that we have. Also, the fact that we never seem to meet up with the quota as per the usual. We struggle, and that has also had an impact on our our inflows in terms of revenue. Now, the federal government has, should I say, ordered the NNPCL to raise outputs to 2.5 million barrels per day by 2026. Now, this is not a wave a magic wand kind of thing. It doesn't work that way. It's as simple as you want this to happen, then other things need to be put in place. Other things need to happen for them to work side by side. If you don't do certain things, if you don't plug the holes and so on and so forth, this is just another declaration on paper, as it were.
Exactly. So, for example, if we look at it now, current production levels are about, Minister says 1.8, I think they're about maybe like 1.6, 1.7, depending on which source you get your information from. And the Minister of State rightly noted that the President had already charged the previous management to raise production levels to 2 million barrels by the end of the year. However, he's spoken to the new management and said that they should raise it to 2.5. So that's a gap of at least about maybe 600, 700 barrels. Like you also rightly noted, it's not magic. They can't just raise those levels. The minister argues that a lot of the challenges that have existed before are being addressed by, the government. Things like oil bunkering,
Hmm.
oil theft,
Yeah.
you know, um, faulty equipment, and all of that. He says that government is addressing that, so he believes that this target is quite realistic. However, well, that remains to be seen. We're already 5 months into the year, which means that the new management has about 7 months to be able to achieve these targets. Can they achieve it? I'm not quite sure. But then, I can understand the motivation behind raising the target to 2.5 million barrels, because if you look at it, a lot of our income is based on oil revenue. Already, the estimated by oil barrel price, that the budget had been based on, has already fallen, because now oil is selling for below I think it's about $58 per barrel now or so.
50, 59 thereabouts.
Exactly, and the budget was based on
75.
75 exactly. So that's a shortfall, a significant shortfall. So I can imagine the government's angst in terms of ensuring that enough revenue is raised. Now, for me, aside from just making proclamations, making charges, it would be nice to know that this thing is actually conceivable and to know what plan the NNPCL, has. So this article reports that the minister has charged the new management, but we don't hear back from NNPC. So it would be nice to hear what NNPC says in this regard. There's a new management. I'm sure that they're already surveying the landscape, trying to identify what the problems and challenges are, and they will also come up with their own plans and programs as to how to address these things. It would be nice if oil production barrels levels can be raised that high. Minister noted that the last time we had such levels was pre-COVID-19, which was about 2019 thereabouts, when we're producing over 2 million barrels of oil, and then since then figures have gone down. So it would be nice to know what the plans are exactly to be able to achieve this. Oil theft is a major issue. Still remains a major issue even now, although the presidency says that they're addressing it, but then it still remains a major issue. I remember sometime last year, we had reports about the discovery of a conduit to, should I call it conduit pipe or whatever, shipping crude oil, offshore, and there were a lot of surprises as to how that kind of thing could exist.
I mean, I was surprised based on the fact that these pipes were not just dropped there.
Exactly.
It would have taken a lot of work to set them up, connect, and so on and so forth. So while all that was going on, did nobody notice anything?
Exactly. So sometimes I wonder whether we're really serious or whether we're just being joking, or whether we're just joking rather. So for me, it would be for the new NNPC management first and foremost to let us know what the current challenges are, what their plans are as to achieving this, if this is even achievable, or if they have a contrary plan, and and for them to spell out what they believe that they can achieve within the period. It would be nice if they can achieve it though.
Okay, two things. You already talked about, or you mentioned the issues that we have concerning oil theft and all that. Now, looking at the fact that over time, there have been accusations that there are individuals who are in high places, who are high powered, are involved in this particular thing. Now, bearing that in mind, do you think that the fight to end oil theft and all going on in that area, do you think that it's actually going to happen if you have the so-called powerful people allegedly being involved in this particular thing? Isn't that, speaking from both sides of the mouth at the end of the day?
Well, exactly. Considering that we haven't, to the best of my knowledge, we haven't ever heard about any known or significant personality who is behind all of this. And we for me, it is sort of clear that the kind of people who can afford to engage in this kind of activities must be highly placed, and there must be some sort of connections to significant quarters for them to be able to get away with it. So that's sort of like a side discussion. That is the government also ready to be able to address this sort of people and be able to name and shame and ensure that they face the consequences of their actions as well. So it's not just about discovering, hidden pipes, siphoning crude, offshore and all of that. It's also about dealing with the personalities behind that. So, we don't want to hear about some clandestine investigations where we never find out what the outcome is. We want to know, and there should be clear deterrence so that other people, also don't engage in this. If there are people who, belong to official sources that are also involved in this as well, these sort of people should also be named and shamed and made to face consequences of their actions.
But do we ever make these people face consequences? That's one of the issues, or one of the problems that we face in Nigeria. And when all is said and done, there's also the need to, should I say, focus on non-oil exports a lot. I know the government is, trying to push forward on that front. We can't just keep all our eggs in the basket of oil and petroleum and so on and so forth, which actually leads me to the next story here coming out of the Punch. The Director General of the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, that's MAN, Shegun Ajayi Kadir, has commended the Nigeria First Policy Directive unveiled on Monday by the federal government. Now, relatedly, the Nigerian Employers Consultative Association, NECA, said without proper implementation across all ministries, departments, and agencies, the federal government's recent procurement policy of buying made in Nigeria goods could suffer the fate of many like it. Also, former Senate leader Ali Ndume commended the ban placed on the importation of foreign goods. Now, foreign goods are not a bad thing, not a bad thing by any stretch of the imagination. But if you decide to ban certain goods that are not made in the country, do you have the ready-made alternatives, the ready homemade alternatives in flooded the markets that are of similar or better quality to those things? And of course, as has been said here by the DG of MAN, that the policy is good. It's great on paper. It's, theoretically, it makes a lot of sense. But if implementation isn't done properly across all the MDAs, it's more or less dead on arrival.
Yeah, so exactly. And like the director general of the MEN also said, charity must begin at home. The federal government must also lead the charge for you know adopting the Nigeria First policy. So for me, it's sort of in two parts. Is there a willingness to be able to? Is there a willingness to patronize made in Nigeria goods? And then the second one is, even the made in Nigeria goods, are there, is this a blanket ban on all foreign goods? Do we have, adequate, I don't want to use the word substitutes, but adequate
Alternatives.
alternatives within the country? So, for example, are we banning all foreign goods? Are we saying, and to what extent are we banning these things, for example? So, at some point, I remember when was it the National Assembly wanted to purchase cars for the members,
Right, right,
and
right.
there were calls as to them purchasing made in Nigeria vehicles. They didn't.
They shut
They,
that down.
exactly, they purchased foreign vehicles. So my assumption now is that with this Nigeria First policy, when those cars are full, the cars that they currently use are fully depreciated, are they going to purchase made in Nigeria cars? Is the presidency also going to purchase made in Nigeria's cars? Because, for example, the president's car is not a made in Nigeria car.
No, it is not.
Is he going to purchase a made in Nigeria car?
That would be a big litmus test.
Exactly. So those are the kind of things that we need to look at, and no one will take us serious if, and when I mean no one, even we won't take ourselves serious if from the highest, stratus of the country we're not patronizing made in Nigeria. So, like you said, it's nice to have, but then will it be implemented, and to what extent will it be implemented? Sometimes I just think that this kind of pronouncement should be done. Let me use the word realistically. So you sort of phase them, because you also need to find out to what extent some of the goods we have in terms of quality, availability, even pricing. Because, for example, so man has always complained over the years, about a lot of infrastructural challenges. So power, for example, and cost of power has made a lot of manufacturers, add up their own power, which ultimately has probably made their cost rise. So those are some of the things that we're talking about. Some people would patronize some foreign goods because they're cheaper, as against the Nigerian good, which is more expensive. And it's more expensive in Nigeria because of all the challenges that have gone through the production process. So the federal government also needs to, address that part as well. Because if you say that you're going to ban a foreign good and we should go for the Nigerian replacement, okay, we try and go for the Nigerian replacement. But ultimately, some people still find ways of bringing in some foreign goods, and people will end up patronizing them because they may probably be cheaper, or they may probably be of better quality.
Right.
So that's even another challenge that we also need to address. So for me, like the DG said, implementation is key, and we need to see that implementation from the top first and foremost. So he noted rightly that the federal government is the biggest spender. Yes, let's see the federal government use made in Nigeria goods all the way. Let's see our president going to do his vacation in Obudu, for example, instead of going abroad. Because yes, let's see, him driving a made in Nigeria car. Let's see us wearing made in Nigeria clothes. Sometimes you don't need to preach some things. You just need to model them. And then people will take dressing based on what they can see. So let's even see them modeling this new initiative that they brought about, and then we can all sort of take dressing.
Right.
Foreign education. which is also another thing. So this, if you sit down and you analyze these things, we're a bit dependent on foreign things
a
in
bit.
various. I'm just trying to be modest. We're largely dependent on foreign things in various aspects of society: healthcare, education, transportation, power, so many things. So before we come out with a Nigeria first policy, we need to be sure first and foremost we can implement the policy, and probably also try and stratify the implementation of that policy, and sort of find out where you can start with quick wins before you gradually move through, towards, the harder things. So, for example, with things like healthcare, I know we don't produce all our vaccines, for example, locally. Some of it is imported. So, are we going to say now that we're going to have to compel? Well, ultimately, maybe what that will mean is that some of these foreign companies will have to come into Nigeria, and set up shop, and then you can see that we're purchasing items, you know, made in Nigeria items. So
You'll have to, but will they?
exactly, citing our infrastructural challenges. So there's a lot of things that go into this. It's a really nice policy. I've always been pro Nigeria. And as much as possible, I try to buy things that are made in Nigeria, but sometimes it's hard because when you compare the quality, and sometimes this quality isn't deliberately poor. It's just because the manufacturers have to scrimp and save to be able to get to the point of where they are. And remember, we've been down this road before, because many years ago we had buy the naira to save
the naira.
buy Nigeria to save the naira. Exactly. And what came out of that?
You know what? This particular issue that we actually have here, it's looking at the issues that we have, the problems that we have in terms of infrastructure and so on and so forth. Like we said earlier, fantastic policy, in theory. And we're looking at how practical it would actually be. But if this is going to work across board, I mean, I'm just wondering here, wouldn't it be, should I say, more practical if we're already in a position where we're strongly pro production here? Because we're a largely consumer country, not a production country. So we're still not in that phase yet. Wouldn't this have been a better situation where, if across board, okay, we're already producing on a large scale in different sectors, healthcare, and so on and so forth, then we could say, oh, because we're in this position now, because we're largely a production economy, production country, let us then push this policy forward. I'm not saying it's entirely a bad thing now. I'm just looking at, okay, would it have been different if all those things were in place and then this was done?
Yeah,
What
so
do you think about
that's why I was
that?
alluding to phasing it.
Okay.
So, for example, what are we doing well already in, and then we go from there. So, for example, if we say the alternatives to cars, they're indigenous car manufacturers. There are at least three or four, that I can reel off the top of my head. Now, the question is, do they produce enough to be able to satisfy the need within the country? Those are the kind of things that we need to look at. Healthcare, we have pharmaceutical companies. Do they produce enough to meet our needs? There are so many other sectors. So we need to look at the production capacity also. Also, there are challenges because, one feeds into the other. You know, the man DG had cited, I think, sometime last year about how the challenges a lot of manufacturers had faced, which had caused some of them to close shop. So a lot of other people have had to manage, create their own alternatives to address the problems that they have, to ultimately be able to produce the goods that they're producing. But this will come at a cost, not just to them, but also to us. So ultimately, even with this Nigeria first policy, I haven't seen it anywhere, but I'd like to see a situation whereby the government is also, working in the back end to ensure that all the manufacturers, also have some sort of support
Right.
to
That
be able
that is
to
very
address
key.
the challenges that they have. Otherwise, it's just going to be another policy.
Okay, let me take a message or two before we move on to more stories here this morning. Let's see who's talking to us. This is from Jerry. Jerry says, good morning, Ayo, and Gbubemi. Good morning to you, Jerry. If you take the words of this government for it, then I need to check. Then I need to check your head. Really, if they want us to believe them at all on the ban of on foreign goods, Let them lead by example and let it be extended by using our local or indigenous hospitals and their children attending our schools. These are our main foreign exchange consumers. There's no such discipline by this government in power. We know who could exemplify such if he had not been rigged out of power. Who was rigged out of power? Jerry. Please mention names. I don't know who you're talking about. Who else is talking to us here? Okay, there's no name attached to this one. It says everyone in the studio already criticizing the policy. Kindly prefer solutions. When did we criticize the policy? It says it starts with a step. It's tiring to listen to a station that assembles only people who speak against the government. We need a balanced argument. Then you can decide not to listen because I don't know where we were criticizing the government. Really, if you were listening right from the start. He then says this will force manufacturers to set up factories here. The time to start is now, not later. Nigerian manufacturers will earn more. This is part of what we're talking about. We didn't say, we're not saying that
Exactly.
they shouldn't set up shop here. We're saying that to set up shop here, we know there are a myriad of challenges. Will those challenges be addressed? Because you can decide to set up as many factories as you want to, but if those challenges that are not going to make them productive are still there, then it's a waste of time. So I don't know where anybody criticized the policy, but thank you for your message and very much appreciated. Well, let me take another message here. This is Ajayi Olonilowa who says, with the current uncertainty in the international oil market, the government should place emphasis on local refining of petrol instead of export of crude. Nigeria should wean itself off this petrol dollar. All right, thank you for your message there, Ajayi. Very much appreciated. All right, let's move on to the Vanguard newspaper talking about matters of security. Defense Minister has been speaking in the person of Mohammed Badru Abubakar. Now, he has disagreed with some members of the House of Representatives that terrorists in Nigeria are better armed and more sophisticated than the Nigerian military. Now, he made the claim while giving the scorecard of the Defense Ministry at the 2025 ministerial press briefing at Radio House in Abuja on Tuesday. And he slammed such bogus claims, saying that terrorists were merely using some improvised facilities to attack with heavy capacity bombs. Now, he also mentioned that terrorists and bandits were also being aided and abetted by fifth columnists who feed them with intelligence that enable them to escape being crippled by the military. Now, he also talked about he was responding to the call made by the National Assembly for a national security summit. Now, he said that beyond summits, the country also needs appropriate strategy to overcome security threats.
Okay, so let me start from that summit. And, um, personally, I get tired when we have, talk shops. We come, we talk about the issues, release a communique, but nothing happens. And I'm sure if we look back, there have been some sort of security summits or something, in times past. What have the results of those been? Over the years, and we've had this terrorism situation for at least over almost 20 years now.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thereabouts.
exactly. Almost 20 years now. And there have been arguments from the fact that, oh, the army wasn't properly equipped, they had faulty equipment, or the men were not properly trained, or they were not motivated, blah 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 blah. Clearly there's an issue. Those on ground, according to the reports, believe that the terrorists are better equipped. The military says otherwise. And for me, if we look at it plainly, if the military believes that they are better equipped, then they should have had an upper hand by now. It doesn't appear so. And I
Mm.
stand to be corrected on this. On the intelligence issue, where he says that fifth columnists are supplying terrorists with information. When we talk about intelligence, one thing I always say is everybody should have their own boots on the ground. You understand? So by now, how don't, and I say this loosely because I don't know for sure, how don't they also have intelligence sources within the terrorism camps, or the real terrorism camps?
Mm.
Because for example, if you are saying that there are people who have been infiltrated on our side and are providing information to them, by now you should also have your own people on the
On
other
the
side,
inside,
exactly,
your
who are
assets there and so on.
exactly who are also providing information. So every year we hear, for example, about repentant Boko Haram
Terrorists.
terrorists who have been rehabilitated into society and all of that. Aren't some of these people good for providing information, intelligence? You understand?
Mm.
You know how in all those foreign movies where you see somebody who defects, and they defect privately and then they send them back and then they go back and infiltrate,
They
stuff like
become double agents, that kind of thing.
exactly. So I don't know, sometimes it sounds like excuses really. It would be nice to know what the real challenges are. It would be nice to know what the real challenges are without having to convene another money guzzling security summit. And to be honest, I can't say I have an idea as to how it will be done. I just believe that there should be less talk and more action. Less talk and more action. How will that be done? Already, each of all the security forces, the police, the military, even the local communities, they already have some sort of information. So how can that information be collated? Also, the various state governments, everybody knows where the shoe is pinching. You understand? Okay, so maybe they shouldn't even end up having this summit. I don't know. It sounds like I'm contradicting myself. But I'm just trying to avoid the situation where people just come together, talk, 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 and nothing happens. Because it gets very frustrating. We want to see action. So what exactly are the real problems? So the military should actually tell us what the problems are. You know,
If there wasn't a track record of all these sort of summits and conferences beforehand, we probably wouldn't raise an eyebrow right now that they want to have it. So, but we know that over time we've had all these different summits and so on and so forth,
exactly.
conferences. You just come together, they talk, they do this and that, but nothing happens afterward.
So it would be
So I think
nice
that's
to
the main
see.
issue: the fact that there's a track record of these sort of things, but nothing comes out of
Nothing
it.
exactly. So that's what we're saying. We want to see outcomes. And terrorism didn't start overnight, so we obviously don't expect this war against the terrorists to end overnight. But it would be nice to see gradual successes happening over time, reclaiming of territories. So, for example, areas like Niger, at some point, I think it was the governor that said a significant part of the state had already been overrun. Borno, Yobe, other parts of the north as well, have already been infested with all these terrorists. So it would be nice for for us to see some wins and reclaiming of areas back within our federal control
Right,
and
right.
state control.
That is something that needs to happen. We've been battling this for way, way too long. Too many lives have been lost. Too much has gone to waste. Okay, very quickly, let's talk about the tax reform bills very, very quickly. Coming out of the premium times, the Senate on Wednesday passed two of the four tax reform bills proposed by President Bola Tinubu. Now, the two bills passed were the Nigeria Revenue Service Establishment Bill and the Nigerian Tax Administration Bill. They were passed after the senators reviewed the report of an ad hoc committee chaired by Niger East Senator Sonny Musa, and the committee was constituted to address controversies and disputes surrounding the proposed reforms. And on Wednesday, the contents of the bills were debated and considered at the committee of the whole. So let me just let you get into this one. Two of the four bills were passed. VAT has been retained at 7.5%, so on and so forth. But really quickly, because of time, just give us a summary of where we are right now.
Okay, so earlier on we were talking about increasing our revenue sources, and this is one area that the federal government is focusing attention on. Collection of taxes, harmonization of taxes across the country. So we don't just focus on oil sales, but we also focus on generating revenue, not just internally, also but externally. So that's one of the motivations behind creation of the um, National Revenue Service, sorry, to replace the Federal Inland Revenue Service. The bill also seeks to change the distribution of the tax revenue within, amongst the
Among the
federal government, the states,
states.
and the local
Yeah.
governments. Now, it's instructive to know that the Senate has passed two of these bills, and the House of Representatives had earlier passed those bills as well. So they've said that they will harmonize both and come out with a unified position that the president will give assent to. So how soon that will happen, we don't know. Two bills are still outstanding as well. The aim, ultimately, at the end of the day, is that you know the federal government, the state governments will have a unified tax position. The flow of tax revenue will be distributed more equitably, according to the policy that they've done, and ultimately we should be able to see more significant revenue being coming to each of the states. So let's see. Anyway, I haven't seen the final what they've passed now, so I can't comment deeply about it.
All right, let me take your messages. Let me run through them as quickly as I can. A number of thoughts have come in. This is Peter and Festac says, banning imported goods, another play. President Tinubu bought an Escalade of almost 1 billion and the agencies bought cars of 170 million naira. They are practicing double standards. The APC came unprepared since 2015. This declaration was first by President Buhari and we're seeing the results. How many Nigerians can even afford a foreign used car? Not to talk of a locally made one. No plans, just come in, air, and pronounce bans. This is from Tony Nisola says, I don't think the Nigeria First policy is about banning foreign goods, but making MDAs to purchase made in Nigeria goods. But most people know it's just empty government talk as usual. We watch, we wait, and we watch. Damilola in Lagos Island says, the Nigeria First policy is great, but I fear there will be an underground waiver market or waiver for fee racket. It would not surprise me, in all honesty. Secondly, the president's car is a high-tech security vehicle that is not marketed or made here in Nigeria, so to be exempt from the policy, in my opinion. Why can't we make that kind of car here? Why can't we make it here? What's stopping us from making it here? The people that made it don't have two heads now. We can make our own here as well. Let it be across. Let it be across board, please. Made Nigeria first. That's what we're doing right now. This is Chibuke Roy Aku says, most Nigerians now buy Nigerian music. It's only for nostalgic reasons that we bother with foreign artists. There was no policy that brought that about. I've begun to create products worth using. People will sell them for us by word of mouth. The policymakers themselves will have no choice than to align. I get what you're saying, Chibuke, but comparing music to production, I think it's apples and oranges when you put them side by side. But I get your point that you're making. JJ says, ban on foreign goods. In an administration where industries are closing up, a large amount of Nigerians don't even have the funds to buy foreign goods. It's the political class and the very rich that do that. Most do secondhand. Tony Marine Beach says, can we also have legislation making it mandatory for public officials, children to study at home, drive only made in Nigeria cars, treatment abroad must be fully paid for by public officials, and so on. With these, there'll be quick development in both sectors. Live says, Ayo, even if you criticize the government, is it not your right? Please let anyone that sends those messages to know that it is your right. All right, thank you, Live. Let me see here. Can I squeeze in a bit more? This is, okay, there's no name attached to, okay, this is, I think it's Adesua. It says, I laugh when they say we'll produce more. The contracts are given to their people who come to manufacturers and buy at paltry prices. They are then hiked by the middlemen who walk away with huge profits. Until they buy directly from manufacturers, this won't work. Secondly, for many industries, backward integration is a challenge. Sourcing the raw materials is a huge problem. In the tissue industry, a major producer of raw materials has currently stopped supplying local producers raw materials because they are also competitors. Imagine if we're supplying an agency and couldn't get raw materials. I will seem as unserious and lose that business. Okay, Eddie Murphy in Ogba says, these summits also accommodate the fifth columnist being complained about, and the columnists go back to feed their employers with the latest plans and developments by the government. Okay, let me squeeze in one more. Judy says, I think the next summit on security should be for them to come and tell us what they achieved with the previous summits. Please, it is better we see more success and less talk. Nigeria is bleeding. All right, thank you for all the messages. I've been able to run through as many as I can. Very much appreciated. And thank you so much, Gbubemi, for joining me on a Thursday. It's been a pleasure having you in the studio.
Thank you very much for having me.
All righty, keep it tuned to your Love Music, Love Live station Smooth 98.1, 8:15 will be time to talk all about entertainment and everything within that space in the grapevine.
The headlines, the stories, the news, in-depth analysis of national current affairs.